Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it. Every morning, the 28-year-old Anna happily went to work at the regional hospital. She was doing the job she loved. Therefore, any professional difficulties were perceived as growth, and she did not cringe over them and did not lose confidence. Since childhood, the young woman dreamed of becoming a therapist, differing from her fellow students at the medical university, who saw themselves as surgeons and traumatologists. There's no prospects for you, is there? My friends marveled. You won't make a big name for yourself. You won't make a fortune. Why do you need a therapeutic department? You've wasted so many years of study in medical school, and then you listen to the heart and measure the blood pressure of the elderly. What's wrong with that? She immediately defended herself. Don't think there's anything to be ashamed of in front of ambitious students. I don't have to be a star in the sky. But I did a lot of good for those who needed it. Underestimate the work of a therapist, if not his competent work. Many patients would not have received skilled care from other specialists. It is only at first glance it seems that the specialty is useless, simple, and you sit in the office at least a couple of shifts, taking a few dozen people concerned about their health. Then we'll talk. Anna, fearing neither the opinion of others nor any difficulties, confidently pursued her goal. All her childhood was inspired by the example of her mother, who worked as a nurse in the hospital where her daughter now works. She raised Anna alone, having lost her husband early. But she did not give up medicine. In her youth, the woman dreamed of tightly linking her life with surgery to get an education. But the death of her husband before the birth of Anna has messed up all the cards. Linda had to forget about the dreams and live a more modest life, spending all the time and earnings on the growing-up daughter. In part, Anna became a real doctor in order to support her mother. Her business gave her dream come true. As a child, she would measure her mother's uniform and twirl around in it in front of the mirror, imagining herself as an adult and smart, able to save people. At university, she successfully completed her residency and became a general practitioner. "What a clever girl you are," Linda said in a weak voice. In the morning, watching her daughter get ready for work. "What luck for our regional office. They got such a specialist. Yada, 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 yada on you. I'll pray for your well-being, career growth." Anna was insanely happy that her mother was proud of her. On the way home, she recounted the latest news, who had retired and who had resigned with a scandal, laughed at the mistakes of the inexperienced interns, sharing gossip. Though she was not a fan of discussing other people's lives, it made Linda feel alive. For several years, she had been plagued by various illnesses. A weak immune system easily succumbed to any infection. Linda grew weaker, and her daughter's stories briefly brought her back to a time when she herself was young and running through hospital corridors. From the first days of her work, inexperienced Anna showed herself to her senior colleagues as a promising specialist, able to keep her cool even in the most unusual situations. Different people with different needs came to see her, but the woman knew how to find an approach to everyone, leaving them satisfied. Rarely anyone could take Anna out of her mind. She tried not to pay attention to the passions boiling in the department. She preferred to concentrate on practicing her skills. At first, they did not allow her to deal with serious cases, leaving only to observe the actions of older colleagues, commenting on each of their actions. As a teachable moment, she appreciated that most doctors did not look down on her, keeping their methods of work secret, but shared them to make it easier for the newcomer to adapt. But not everything in life was as smooth as it might seem at first sight. She told her mother Linda about others about their successes or mistakes, about their relationships, breakups, but her own personal life and the true difficulties she preferred to keep silent. Anna did not want to worry her mother, who was already often nervous, sensing the deterioration of her general condition. Elizabeth, her main rival, was a great problem for Anna. The jealous and stubborn woman also spotted an elderly therapist who was about to leave her position and passed it on to younger talent. Both applicants were unwilling to give up and tried not to concede anything to each other. Only they underestimated Elizabeth's intentions. "I don't know why she's so pissed at me." Anna sighed at lunch, sitting at the table with her tray in the company of Nurse Margarita. Though in the hospital hierarchy, doctors often considered themselves superior to the rest of the nursing staff and behaved disdainfully toward them. The same could not be said of Anna. They had known each other for several years, and Margarita helped Anna in many ways, showing her the ins and outs of the department and sharing the quirks of all the doctors. "I've noticed that too," Margarita nodded. "Sometimes she just pokes you with a look like, isn't that a bad person in the way? You can't be frank with such people, and you always have to keep your eyes open. I wish I'd known what to do. I was tired of always feeling some kind of danger around her." Marguerite opened her eyes wide for a moment. It was as if it had struck her, a startling thought. What if it was because of Dave? She was always flirting around him. Anna continued to wonder about the reasons for Elizabeth's jealousy, not knowing how right her friend was. Some on the ward had noticed that Dave had been making more and more visits to the therapy department over the past few months. And every now and then, Elizabeth would make an emergency visit to his office. A passionate romance flourished between the colleagues. However, Dave, from the first day of Anna's arrival at the institution, could not get away from the thought of her, could not hold himself back and not pass by, just to see a new professional. "How nice to see young and talented doctors," Dave said, sneaking up behind Anna and touching her unequivocally. "I will follow your progress, Anna. Colleagues speak very flatteringly of you. And I'm curious, not only was he 15 years older, overweight, and smelled bad, Anna tried to avoid his proximity, almost jumping aside to avoid breathing the same air as him. Dave did not seem to notice her dislike, finding her behavior amusing, which he mistook for embarrassment. He's the type of man who considers himself a king, even with this appearance." Margarita rolled her eyes. "At least he washes sometimes. The chief physician himself talks to all kinds of bigwigs. Isn't he smart enough to buy a good deodorant or perfume? I think I'm going to faint from oxygen deprivation one day. If he ever gets that close to me again," Anna complained. "You're out of luck, my friend. Powerful people are always hard to deal with. Diplomacy doesn't help. He could ruin your career." And she knew she didn't need Dave's sympathy. He didn't appeal to her as a man in any way. And to make a professional start with a head physician seemed humiliating to her. She wanted to achieve everything on her own, and she didn't need the attention of her superiors. She was tired of Dave's social attitudes. His manner of speaking to her with inappropriate remarks, the smell of her hair, her beauty, her eyes, the softness of her skin, her hands and her luxurious figure. She hated her position in which she couldn't be rude to the head doctor and stop courting once and for all. But the man wouldn't let up and tried at every opportunity to put his hand on her shoulder or pinch her side, and he didn't want to erect, but she lingered and behaved professionally. Dave was confident in his position in the hospital and his influence over the staff. He knew he wasn't liked, but he didn't take the moods of his subordinates personally. The man believed they couldn't understand his leadership methods and would never take his position. That's why he was criticized. No one spoke out to him to the eye. But the gossip was being reliably reported to him by Elizabeth. Despite her outward attractiveness and grip, Elizabeth did not rely on her own strength and hoped for help from her lover. She considered herself possessive. Therefore, having no romantic feelings for Dave, She feared only the loss of his patronage and decent bonuses written only to her. The man often laundered money at the expense of various hospital events, so he could afford to live beyond his means and pamper Elizabeth with expensive gifts. After another dinner at Dave's apartment, Elizabeth ventured into a conversation that excited her. She could no longer tolerate the way he looked at Anna, the way he tried to always be there for her, completely unsparing of the feelings of the woman with whom he was in a relationship. "What do you find in Anna that is so important to you?" Elizabeth plunged into her silk robe and settled comfortably on the soft pillow. Dave didn't want to discuss his romantic interest, but Elizabeth's firm gaze told him he couldn't avoid answering. "What do you think? Do I like her? Why are you having this conversation if you know you won't like the answer?" Dave stroked Elizabeth's bare knee and kissed it. "I feel like a fool, crossing my arms over my chest. Anna's no good for you at all. She won't be yours, no matter how hard you try." Dave pulled away, insulted at once. He did not tolerate remarks, especially from women. He did not want to hear about his unattractiveness, so the conversation did not develop further. The atmosphere between the lovers became heated. Both did not want to make a scandal and say something unnecessary, so Elizabeth packed up and left for her apartment, satisfied that she was able to upset the man. She did not just talk about Anna. She plans to further turn Dave against this upstart. Elizabeth decided to play the fool in love with her colleague, who was jealous of Dave for Anna. Anna waited for the woman in the break room, glad they were alone, and proceeded to the next item of her plan. "You only pretend to be an innocent sheep, and you answer to my place, that you want to spin my Dave and through the bed take the office you want. I didn't expect that from you. I was jealous of your intelligence, but I was wrong. You're nothing." "Elizabeth, stop it," shouted Anna, who was tired of being blamed everywhere and enduring the attacks of an incomprehensible couple. "What on earth makes you think that? That I'm interested in him? How could you fall in love with him?" Anna was surprised, looking at the beautiful, tear-stained face of Elizabeth. "You're such a good-looking young woman. How could you do that? I don't want Dave. He's the one who's coming on to me. I would never. Don't worry, I would never go out with him. I just can't be around him. He smells bad. He smells bad. His hair is always greasy and his palms are sweaty. His age and his manners I'm not even talking about. Even if he was handsome in writing, I wouldn't look at him. He's not my kind of man. Not at all." "Do you think he's ugly?" Elizabeth was indignant, and she was not ready to believe the reality of her feelings. It was impossible to love such a man without memory. It didn't make sense. He was a good man, kind, understanding. Were you not worthy of him? So please be glad he's only yours. I wouldn't even go out with him for any money. Elizabeth was satisfied with the result of the whole emotional conversation with Anna. She recorded it on video and then showed it to Dave so that he could hear with his own ears how his beloved thought of him. The man became furious and threw his lover's phone against the wall. Why did she shrink? Anna didn't think that the truth was so vulnerable that he would get angry with the ungrateful wretch herself. What a bitch. I'll show her. Let's see how she sings when she has to take responsibility for her words. What are you going to do? Silently asked Elizabeth, fearing to get under the hot hand, but triumphing from the success of her mischief. I'll punish her. She'll be sorry she opened her mouth to me. For several days, Dave was in a state of rage, constantly snapping at his subordinates. He was unhappy that his woman had witnessed Anna's dirty talk. Anna herself was working quietly, without unnecessary attention, and was even surprised that Dave was no longer hanging around. Anna wanted to thank Elizabeth for influencing the situation, and was able to tame the chief physician's passion, but she had no idea what awaited her. Dave puzzled over how to get back at him by rejecting him, not to be remembered for life, Because of his position, he could pull off any kind of business. And he had experience in forging documents. "Anna is looking for you," is tearing and swearing. Said to come, urgently called out a woman nurse and went about her business, not wanting to be dragged into some scandal with his superiors. He is not at heart. It had been uneasy since morning. Anna woke up with a feeling of something bad, but did not know where to expect to catch. She entered the office after knocking with excitement, but tried to pull herself together. "Are you trying to drive me crazy?" Dave started without any greeting or explanation. "We just got this machine, and it's already useless. Where the hell am I going to get the money to fix it? You think we get funding every day? They'd tear my head off for it." "Dave, what are you talking about? What machine?" Anna looked at him puzzled. "Don't play dumb." Dave suddenly slammed his fist on the table, and she cringed in surprise. The situation was getting stranger and stranger. "Yesterday, we got the new equipment and everyone ran to look at it. You weren't even supposed to be there. You're an internist. You were supposed to be there. I was told you were the last one out of there. The machine was fine. And this morning, it turned out to be out of order and in need of repair." Anna was at a loss, not knowing whether she should justify herself or be outraged. It came to her belatedly that the boss's outburst of anger might be connected with her conversation with Elizabeth. What if this snake immediately ran to report everything to the head, and in color described all her epithets to him? All she had to do was to remain calm. "Dave, I understand you're upset, but I'm not the right person for you. I don't know what to do about fixing the machine now, but when I left, there was a bunch of staff there. Besides, I don't even know how to use it." "Stop lying. I know it's you, and it's not up for discussion. Dave took a risk. You're going to have to pay the price. Either quit. Just remember, you won't be able to get a job in any hospital in the city. I made sure of that. You can be sure of that. And you'll be working as a nurse. No career advancement. And you can forget about your mentor's job, can't you?" Anna's eyes flooded with tears as she walked down the hall to Dave's office. Anna couldn't imagine how this conversation would turn out for her. Everything was happening too fast. The man wasn't even hiding his gloating, smiling contentedly at her shock and rejection. Anna was shaking with anger and resentment. She could have had a fight with her boss. But would that help? He definitely had influence in the medical field and was right to bet that she would agree to his humiliating terms. Anna did not tell her mother about the changes in her professional life. She regretted not being able to hold back tears in front of Dave when she accepted his offer to become one with the nurses. He wouldn't have been so satisfied with what he did, and if not for her desperation, might have reconsidered his decision. Anna realized that she had fallen for a captive man, but she couldn't do justice to him in her own strength. Now Linda saw no happy smiles in the mornings. Daughters going to their shifts. They spent less and less time together because Dave had taken over the duties of the nurse on leave, and she was running around the department, not feeling her feet to get everything done, despite her efforts and quick response. Many patients complained that the nurse rarely visited them, and then Dave reprimanded Anna like a schoolgirl. "You spite me," shouted the boss at her. "I don't shy away from people in the corridors. I do the work for 2 people. It is physically impossible to manage everything. Will you try? Or are you out of here? And I'll demand the money for the machine through the court." Anna was completely shattered. Margarita helped as much as she could. But she had her own responsibilities, and she was afraid of falling out of favor with Dave. At home, her daughter did not talk about her problems. She also fought constantly with her mother, who could not be left alone all day. Anna used to come home early, but now her mother, suffering from chronic bronchitis, was left to herself for hours on end. The charlatan was here again. Ever since her mother had reconnected with an old friend, Edward the healer had advised her, The woman had constantly resorted to his services. At first they didn't take to him, seriously glad that her mother wouldn't be bored without her. But later he began to pull from the sick Linda. Money increasingly inclined her to believe in the power of miraculous healing. Anna, calm down and don't call him that. Edward is a real healer. He identified all my ailments by one look on my face. He studied Oriental medicine and promised to give me a test session next time. If he sticks one needle in you, I swear. At these words, Linda usually changed the subject. She knew her daughter was annoyed about her work, but she didn't want to quarrel over nothing. Her mother believed that Edward would rid her of at least one annoying infestation. Anna's life had become a nightmare with Dave at its center. She knew she had nowhere else to go. She had to work off her imaginary debt for insulting a powerful man. But she couldn't just walk away. The head doctor knew about Anna's sick mother and punished her in such a cruel, inhumane way anyway, giving her almost no chance to get out of the debt hole he had created for her. If Linda's treatment had not been so urgent, Anna would have quit her job and abandoned her dream of medicine forever, finding a better-paying job. Only Dave would not have allowed her to escape her fate. He tried to intimidate the woman so that she was afraid of a lawsuit they wouldn't be able to pull off. She had neither the money for a lawyer nor the connections to compete with the clever and cunning Dave, who had many useful acquaintances, thanks to a long career as a doctor. "Hold on, my dear," Margarita encouraged her. "Hold on, no matter how hard it is. Things must change. Life does not stand still." "Comfort does not help me," she replied, barely able to open her eyes, because she could not remember the last time she slept more than 6 hours. "I'm like a zombie. I can barely stand up. And you have to think, keep everything in your head that you have to do behind you. And my mother adds to my problems. She doesn't understand how difficult it is to behave, how the child trusts him as a healer, believes in his efforts more than the doctor's prognoses. As if it's not her who has worked for 25 years with gifted scientists, constantly fighting with everyone, both at home and at work. I became abrupt and irritable. I don't know how much more I can take before I finally snap. That's what I do. What should I do? What should I do? Go to toe with this freak so he forgives me? Sell myself to him." Despite her fatigue, Anna always peeked out during the time Dave was out of the hospital and running to Edgar, the head of the internist's office. "Edgar, I'm begging you. At least let me stand next to you at the reception. I'll be quiet. I won't say anything. Just watch. I'm so afraid I'll forget the basics and become useless. And I'm a practitioner. Anna, I would love to, but I can't." "You may, Edgar. The man in charge isn't. It's not like he's watching me. I ain't got nothing else. I'm practically an orderly. I do all the dirty work. I know your hands are not made for that. You're talented." "Okay," the doctor agreed, after thinking for a while, but only quietly. "As promised, no amateurism, no patient advice. If I hear a sound, I'll throw you out into the corridor." From then on, Anna was a little happier, keeping her knowledge a secret from Dave. She kept promises and kept silent at appointments, but during lunchtime she could discuss at length with the therapist about one or another of the patient's problems, and could not help but please her colleagues, perseverance and commitment to her favorite cause. On another day off, they were awakened by voices behind the wall. She quickly guessed that it was Edward, whom she had forbidden to invite into their apartment, who had come to see her mother. But her mother didn't listen. She decided to quietly bring him in early in the morning while her daughter crumbled after their daily routine. As she rolled down the kitchen hallway where the window was open so that the smell of incense would not linger, the man was spreading some stones on Linda's arm and whispering incomprehensible words under her nose. Yasha asked her daughter not to translate it sharply, and the mother immediately flinched. Edward looked up at her with a hard stare. "You can't disrupt the process," he answered grudgingly, not even allowing Linda to justify herself. "You go before I'm finished. then continue. No, you're the one who's going out and not coming back. Otherwise, I'll call the police and see if you have any documents for providing such services, or are you just a crook? Anna, enough with her scolding and blocking the flow of Edwardian energy. And this is a very important session. Don't you want me to get better? Said the mother in a husky voice. Mom, can you hear yourself? He's messing with your head. Your pseudoscientific nonsense, there is nothing. Healer, but I'm not going to repeat myself as a fortune teller off the street. Edward got up reluctantly, threw his things into a small bag and headed down the hall. Anna followed him and didn't open her eyes. At last the man gave her a glance and, spitting under her feet, proudly walked away. During the evening duty, and I was not so immersed in my own thoughts that I did not immediately notice the old man wandering around the ward. He stumbled over the coldness of the staff and walked on, looking for a nonchalant hospital employee. She noticed his old clothes, untidy beard, and dirty hands, so she understood why everyone was shying away from him. The old man was obviously homeless, and they didn't leave them in medical facilities for long. They could carry a disease, and the rest of the patients in the waiting room were not happy about such a neighborhood. Hello, what happened to you? I turned to him without coming closer. The old man was pleased at this attention and smiled slightly. My daughter, Dika, is burning in my chest, and no one wants to examine me. It's all because of the goddamn vodka. But I'm a human being, too. It pains me, he said, shaking himself with a cough. Anna suspected he had pneumonia, so worried about the condition of a man of his age who could not bear such a dangerous illness on his own. Why aren't you hospitalized? It's serious, isn't it? So I'm a bum, even though I wasn't always like this. I have no documents. A year ago, some vagrants found me unconscious in a ditch and brought me to my senses. I went out and joined them. The police wouldn't deal with me. They thought I was just having a fever and was taking up their time. Daughter, please help me. Don't let me die on the street. I am not a bad man. I am not a thief. I am not a bad man. I am not a thief. I have not stolen anything. But I'm not out on the street anymore. Look, I'm not young anymore. I can't do it on my own. Like you say, I need help from a doctor in uniform. I'll be cured somehow. I'm begging you. How can I do that? I can't imagine what I would have to say to get you placed here. Anna hesitated. She wasn't in the best of positions with her superiors either, and allowing herself to take such liberties was a dangerous venture. Say I'm your father, and no one will ask any questions. If you can't do it yourself, ask someone to find out how I can be hospitalized. I can't believe this hasn't happened before. You go into medicine to save lives. Somebody's breaking the rules. And thank him for that from the bottom of his heart, my grandfather went on. My grandfather went on. My name is Bob. I'm an honest man. Now you know me. I just need a couple of days of rest. Get a drip or something, or whatever you need. Without sending me back. The beans please did not leave Anna indifferent. Anna tried to help him even without his requests. She would have helped him with medication, bought it at her own expense, and told him how to use it. But now she was determined to keep him in the hospital. She registered the patient as her own father, taking his advice, and she hoped that Dave would not inflict a new punishment on her for it. In the hospital, as in any other organization, news spread rapidly through the floors. Already in the morning, Anna felt several concerned and mocking glances at her. What an inventor you are. She was juried by another nurse who'd been working at the hospital for years. And if Dave finds out, you'll get into more trouble. Everyone here knows your mother's lived her whole life alone. It's not easy for me without your lectures, Anna answered, as she was getting ready to go home after her night shift. What will be. I'm ready for anything. In addition, the treatment is paid from my own pocket. What do you care what happens? Her colleagues no longer pestered her. She knew what this kind of charity could do to her. So she did not want anyone to remind her of the possible consequences. Anxiety overcame, but on all fronts besides the bean and her professional unsuitability. Anna again could not get the situation with Edward out of her mind, who still visited her mother while she was at work. There was no way Anna could forbid her mother from communicating with him on the line as a sick person. The healer helped by inspiring hope, by giving strength. But for that, Anna paid a tidy sum of money. She no longer knew whether she should fight her mother's obsession or let her receive comfort in the way she chose. Instead of looking after Bob, she tried to drop in on him from time to time, to have at least one familiar face near him that didn't treat him with disdain. The old man had been rattling around in delirium for days. His pneumonia had developed to catastrophic proportions. Another literal day and no doctor or drug would have been able to save him. In those difficult moments when the fever would not go down and Bob needed constant monitoring. Exactly, she was there to care for him. Men often repeated a word. At first, she couldn't make out his mumbling, so she leaned closer to discern what he was talking about. After all, it might have been important. Anna realized that it was the last name stone. It must have meant something to the old man, or even been his own, for a man of his age at memory loss. The last name alone could be the saving straw for a return to normal life. Anna wrote it down and decided to look for people with the same last name. Internet searches yielded results on the very first day. It turned out that Stone Betty and Stone Alexander from the neighboring town were looking for their missing husband and father. Bob's name was actually Jack. He was loved by his family, who went out of their way to grieve not to have tracked down an older man in an entire year. We were already desperate for any news of him. Betty confessed shamefully in a telephone conversation. We buried him in absentia. The police weren't any help in the investigation. None of the locals had seen him. And we figured if Jack had been in trouble, he wouldn't have been dead for 20 years. He's sick, but he'll pull through. The worst is over. Anna promised her, glad that she could find Jack's family, who didn't even know yet how happy news awaited him. Thank you, honey. Without you, we had lost all hope. Granny thanked her. You just come as soon as you can. Jack could use the support of his family. And with you, he'll be on the mend faster. And he's here on a bird's license. The first meeting of the Stone family was awkward but touching. Even Anna, who was by her side in case one of the elderly becomes ill with excessive feelings, could not hold back tears. And Jack, though able to remember his wife and son, still cried. Forgive me, my relatives, but I'm unfamiliar with your names and faces. It is as if I was seeing you for the first time, but I know that you are dear to me. My body responds to your presence, and my heart beats frantically. I'm so glad I'm not alone. Jack covered his face with his hands. He was getting impatient. His voice was thin and pitiful. But Betty hugged his shoulders, not backing away. I knew I had a family. It felt so bitter. All these months I was afraid they weren't looking for me, afraid my family didn't care about my disappearance. That's not true, Dad. Sat on his father's bed, barely restraining his emotions so as not to upset his elderly parents more. We never stopped looking for you, even though we had lost all hope. We went to the police, to the volunteers. I personally went all over the city and called all the hospitals and homeless shelters. I talked to vagrants on the streets, but I had to look somewhere else. The man turned to Anna, who was standing by the door to the room so as not to disturb the relatives, and looked at her so affectionately, with gratitude. If it hadn't been for you, we never would have found Daddy. Thank you so much, Anna. The woman looked into his eyes and only nodded, but a lump came to her throat. All that remains is to find out what happened to him and whose fault it was, said Anna. After being reunited with his relatives, Jack was no longer considered a source of trouble in the hospital. The nursing staff was shocked by the events, and many expressed their admiration and support for the courage that guided her to help a hopeless man. "Yes, you're a hero," Margarita snickered, treating her friend to a homemade pie at lunch. "Does the floor of the hospital hum to you?" "I don't know how Elizabeth hasn't already gone through it and reported it to Dave Maximovich. Anyway, it's all over now. Jack is no longer homeless. He has a home and a family, and he is entitled to treatment here." Anna replied, happy with the outcome. Betty and Alexander visited Jack every day. The man was on the mend, but due to his age, he needed more time to recover. One evening, after a nap at dinner, he told me that he had begun to remember bits and pieces of what had happened in his head. "I've been living with these thoughts for days now, but I can't put them together," Jack admitted. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. I remembered what happened to me before I lost my memory. I'm sure it wasn't a dream. It was real. I remember a little boy about 7 or 8 years old coming up to me on the street. He turned out to be a beggar, holding me by the sleeve of my jacket, but he didn't want money. The boy said his mother needed help, and everyone was shooing him away. I felt sorry for him. So little all by himself at the same time with his own problems. I was afraid something had happened to his mom, and he didn't know how to call an ambulance. He took me to some alleyway that we couldn't see from the street. Only there was no woman there. The boy quickly ran back out. 2 strong men appeared in front of me. They came at me at once. I didn't have time to think. I took a real beating. My whole body was bombed. They pushed me into a car and took me somewhere. I couldn't see the road, but I realized that I was confused with someone else. They would not go after someone like me, and I had never hurt anyone in my entire life. And we never had any money to envy or hate our family. "My God," whispered a stunned Betty. It pained her to hear it. She covered her mouth with her fingers, trying not to interrupt her husband with her exclamations. I was dumped somewhere outside of town, surrounded by thickets. The last thing I did was to get kicked again to show me who was in charge, and I squirmed all over. Then I must have lost consciousness from the pain. I was no longer strong enough. My son's face played with jaws. He was angry at those who had dared to attack his defenseless elderly father, who had failed to fight back. "What else do you remember?" "We have to find these freaks. They'll pay. Remember Smell's special signs. Any scars on their faces. Any scars on their faces." "What else did they say?" Jack pondered, trying to find something else to remember. Yes, there was something. They kept saying something about how they warned me and I should have listened. They said it was greed that ruined me. Something about the mall. Like I was the boss. I shouldn't have opened the mall. Anna was staring at the Stone family. She couldn't believe anyone would do that to a defenseless elderly man for their own benefit. "Whoever's behind this, we're looking for him determinedly," Father Alexander promised. And no one had any doubts that this would be the case. During the time Jack had spent in the regional hospital, Anna had become noticeably closer to his family and himself. It was considered reasonable to move the man to his hometown, closer to home, but he was already used to the staff and conditions in this city, so he decided to stay until he fully recovered. Gradually, he remembered his past life, which made his relatives very happy. "Aneshka won't let me go anywhere," Jack joked. "I've already made my home here." The families thanked Anna endlessly for her kindness and compassionate attitude toward the grief of others. "If I were you, anyone would only do the bare minimum. And you're not." My son Alexander smiled when we were alone. "You saved our family. I am not exaggerating. If you hadn't taken the trouble to find my mother and me, we would never have met my father again, thinking he was dead. It's only a pleasure for me to see how good the 3 of you are," Anna replied modestly. She was pleased with Alexander's attention and even felt that it was not limited to politeness and gratitude. to the obligated family. "Of course he's in love with you," Marguerite confirmed with a sly squint. "You can see how he's suffering from a mile away. He gets worried when you're around. Stop teasing me." But it was embarrassing to recognize deep in her heart that she herself does not care about Alexander. "If I were you, I'd hurry up. Otherwise, someone more intelligent will see you're betrothed." During Alexander's visits, Jack had noticed his son's affection for Anna and more often pretended to be asleep so that he would not linger at his place and spend his time talking to her. He smiled contentedly down the hallway at their silhouettes. She didn't feel it was any easier to get up in the morning for work. She lingered longer in front of the mirror, examining herself and waiting for Alexander to show up at the hospital. Even Linda noticed the change in her daughter, and she told her how she helped Jack meet his family. But there was no mention of her interest in Alexandra, because I'm looking at how good it became. It's obvious that it's about a man. "Come on, Mom. Nothing has been decided yet. I just like him. A decent man, a good man, and you're Jack. To invite to visit us. I have a hard time with travel. It would be easier for them to get to us." Anna began to voice aloud how embarrassed she would be to hear in front of her guests about Edward the Healer's abilities, about which her mother would certainly tell her new free ears, who would be too polite to interrupt the absurd topic. Anna still hasn't found a handle on the charlatan, allowing her mother to communicate with him for many months. The next time she met Alexander, Anna told him about the worrying problem and that she was afraid to get involved with crooks. "I don't know how to influence him. Nothing scares him. He's probably one of those scoundrels who has already faced the selection of his clients' relatives," Alexander suggested. "It is necessary not only to threaten him, but to show that you are determined and do not give weakness." On Sunday, when Edward reappeared at their apartment, Anna called Alexandra. The man arrived together with the district police officer and pointed out the charlatan who was siphoning money from the budget through Anna's line. The healer was taken to the police station and investigated. It turned out that there had been complaints about him before, but no one knew where to look for the scammer. Skillfully bypassing his appearance for new clients turned out to be even corrupt from the wealthy homes he had visited. "Well, finally. Thank you so much." With a rush of feelings, Anna hugged Alexander in an impulse, thanking him for his help. "It looks like we couldn't have done it ourselves. The police already knew about it, but they didn't do anything. Good thing you pressed on." Despite the fact that Jack was discharged and went safely to his hometown, getting used to the familiar, the walls, the streets and faces, all over again, Alexander did not stop his visits to Anna. Both acknowledged mutual sympathy, but took their time, preferring to enjoy each other's company. Alexander was only 2 years older than Anna. He admired the woman's work and her lofty goal of helping people, not just building a career just for the sake of high earnings. He himself had a good profession as an engineer and worked in a well-known construction firm, conducting inspections on sites. Jack lived with his wife soul to soul, thanking fate every day for keeping him alive and bringing him together with the wonderful nurse Anna. One evening after dinner, he began to tidy up his room and go through the newspapers and magazines that had been gathering dust on the shelves in the hall since he had disappeared. And Jack almost dropped a newspaper page from his hands when he saw his picture on it. "Austin confirmed the imminent opening of the new mall. I say yes, expand my business and employ more than 100 people," the ad read. The realization hit Jack almost immediately. So that's who those bandits thought he was. Hoping to scare Austin at his father's request, Alexander found all the information on the internet about Austin, who turned out to be the biggest businessman in their region. "I can't believe it, but you really are like twins," Alexander declared. "Look, you're the same age and your birth dates match, right down to the day. That's lucky. Or maybe not. It doesn't seem fair to get a sibling at the beginning of life, especially a twin. They say you should feel each other at a distance. Yes, it's all nonsense." Jack brushed aside the strange facts. That's not what worries me. With his connections and his obviously rich pedigree, he might not have known I existed. There must be a record of it somewhere. You have to meet him. It is necessary not only for the sake of a reunion, but also to prevent others. Such cases have been attempted on his life. Apparently, his maul has ruined the plans of an equally powerful man. Who knows what he's capable of? Besides, your safety depends on him, too. Family always came first for Jack. He had worked long hours in the factory and had an honorary title of labor veteran to provide for his family and give his son a decent education. The existence of his brother shocked the elderly man. But he didn't think long before he met him. He could not be the only one who knew the truth about the other. It wasn't fair to keep it from Austin. Contacting Austin was not easy. A direct phone number was not easy to obtain. The receptionist who answered the phone stubbornly at Alexander's side did not agree to connect with his boss, a crazy man who claimed that Austin was in danger and that his lost twin brother was warning him. Alexander's whole narrative seemed made up and illogical, but one day Ilya managed to meet his brother in front of the entrance to the mall. Austin didn't visit it every day, so the male half of the family rarely guarded his cars in the parking lot. The large bodyguard immediately booted the businessman with him, showing him not to come any closer to the named guests. Austin, don't avoid me, but come back. Look at me. Jack addressed him from a distance. Austin was about to answer the stranger, but stopped short while he stared at his exact replica. The brothers were so much alike, they even had the same beard. The businessman, however, had a fancy haircut. Now you're ready to believe it? Alexander asked him, bringing him out of his stupor. Let them through, immediately ordered Austin the bodyguard. And he obeyed. Please come with me. He pointed to a huge 4-story mall building. Austin took Jack and Alexander to a restaurant and asked the staff to give them a booth. The decor was opulent but understated for a man of refined taste. The father and son felt uncomfortable, surrounded by expensive furnishings. But they had come on business, not to visit a museum, and they managed to pull themselves together. Austin advised his relatives a good meal and listened to his brother's story. Alexander regarded his own uncle with interest and held back a smile, seeing the awkwardness with which the twins interacted. Both were businessmen used to leading others, and now they sat, confused, not knowing where to begin. Jack recounted his story of the beating and the threats about the mall. He knew nothing more about his shared past with his brother. So perceived, replacing beaten up. Such dirty methods of competition are long overdue for eradication. I can guess who was involved in it. I'll be sure to look into it. I'm sorry you got hurt because of me. I had no idea I had a brother. How do we know the truth? Why would anyone want to separate us? Jack wondered, enjoying a juicy steak. A private detective will take care of that. In the meantime, I suggest we tell each other about ourselves. Too much time has been lost to waste on negativity. Jack's life has changed in just 1 year. He'd been through so much that you wouldn't wish on the enemy, but now he was rejoicing in his newfound family and meeting his brother, his spouse, and his children. His family was worried about Jack, but gave him free rein, leaving him alone with Austin. They have so much to discuss and learn. Betty sighed. What a joy it is to meet a family member no matter what. It was a pity that so many years had been missed, and what their childhood would have been like, and how their destiny would have turned out. Who knows? The elderly wife shared her worries with Anna. She had already been in a relationship with Alexander for 3 months. Frequent guests at her beloved's house. The woman could not believe her happiness, because every day with Alexander gave her unforgettable emotions. She knew that the man loved her, even though not much time had passed since they had met. But lovers admit that they have never experienced such strong feelings. Anna in the family of the Stones loved as if she was their own daughter. She met Austin at a dinner at Alexandra's house. It was her that the family was grateful to her for saving Jack's life. You are just a clever girl, a real talent. You have a beautiful soul as well as your looks. Thanked her brother Jack. I was told about the arbitrariness of the head doctor. Rest assured, I've already tipped off special services. Judging by how easily he twists documents to his advantage, he may do the same in other areas of hospital life. The sudden appearance of the economic crime officers in Dave's office took the man by surprise. He tried to kick the uninvited guests out. Out of fright, he almost squealed, but he was quickly subdued, putting all the available documentation in drawers and confiscating his work computer. In a few minutes, the news of what was happening in the chief physician's office spread all over the hospital, and Elizabeth was worried beyond belief, fearing that the inspection will take her too. The woman knew about the illegal machinations with Money Lover and what he had pulled to force Anna to pay not an affordable amount. After Dave's shameful arrest, Elizabeth chose to quietly resign, so as not to arouse suspicion. Her colleagues, who were asked to contact the reviewing committee, if it became known whether their boss had an accomplice. Anna decided not to stay at the regional hospital, even after obtaining a legal place. Her feelings with Alexander moved to a new level. The man proposed to his beloved to become his wife. She decided to move to her fiancé's hometown, and Austin promised her a place as a therapist in the best clinics. People need a good specialist like you. My friend will be glad to have you on the staff of his clinic. Thank you, Big Uncle. I couldn't have dreamed of working in such an advanced institution. Mattie was relieved to hear about the move. Linda realized that her infatuation with Edwardia would lead to nothing good. Instead of supporting her daughter, she was wasting money for nothing when Anna was earning it so hard. In a new place at Austin's request, Linda was immediately assigned to a friend's clinic for treatment. She could visit her mother at any time, and she was glad to see how quickly, with quality and affordable treatment, she was on the mend. "I'm sorry, little girl," Linda repeated, realizing her mistake. "You have suffered so much all by yourself, and I have only caused you problems. I'm glad with all my heart and soul that it's over and that you're doing what you love to do. Mom." Forget it. Everything behind me kissed her on the cheek. I don't want to lose my career in the bud. Both Jack and Austin also calmed down after getting all the answers from the private detective, who found out everything about their parents' past. Your mother got pregnant by her boyfriend, but he died in the army in an accident, leaving her alone. She was from a good family. Her parents didn't want their daughter to carry the shame, valuing her reputation.